Hey, what's going on guys? Arekkz here, welcome back to another video for Monster Hunter World Iceborne, and today I want to go over some of the changes coming to Iceborne that were recently spoken about in a Capcom livestream. This information actually came out last week, but I was over in Iceland, believe it or not, climbing a glacier in preparation for Iceborne. I promise you there'll be a video for that at some point, but for the time being then, just make of that what you will. Anyway, that being said, I want to recap this because there's some pretty cool changes, especially if you are a fan of elemental weapons, if you're a GUNLANCE fan, and just in general, some things you definitely want to know going into Iceborne. So if you do enjoy this, do find this helpful, then a like would be super appreciated. If you have any questions, by all means let me know in the comments down below. But to begin with, let's talk about elemental adjustments. So broadly speaking, this sheet here, this kind of slide, summarizes the main changes, and the main kind of three things worth talking about are that the maximum attack power boost from elemental attack skills has now been increased. If you guys have used elemental attack skills in the past, things like water attack, thunder attack, fire attack, anything like that, you'll know that typically when you put the gems into your armor, there comes a point where your weapon caps out. You won't, see any kind of increase beyond that point, which for a lot of weapons tends to be around level 3, give or take. But if you then jump over to this chart, they've actually given you an idea as to how it will be changing in Iceborne. They've given you 3 examples here, using the Corona Sword and Shield for Fire Element. They've used the Legia Rhymespire for Ice Element, and the Holy Sabers for Water Element. You can see that in World, you will start off with your base attack. So taking the Corona, for example, you have 180 fire. You can then put your level 1 fire attack gem in to take that up to 210. You can then go to 230, and then it caps out. So beyond that point, there is basically no value in speccing into that skill. But you can now see that in Iceborne, they're actually changing that. Not only does the skill go up to level 6, but you can now see that you do actually yield benefit from spending more points into that. Of course, it's going to take you more armor slots, but if you really do want to lean heavily into your elemental side of things, then there will actually be much greater benefit in doing so, which is really cool because especially for things like Sword and Shield, Dual Blades, or some of the other fast-hitting weapons, then, leading into elements is a really cool thing, and playing just kind of around elements is just a lot of fun. I loved having, that's one of the reasons that I love Sword and Shield so much, because you create these different armor sets just, around different elements, and then you pair the monster's weakness, and it's just kind of, some fun variety. So it's really interesting to see, and of course you can look at the, the example for Legia Rhymespire and Holy Sabers on screen, but basically the long and short of it is that there will be more benefit in speccing more heavily into those elemental skills. However, it doesn't just stop there. There's something else worth talking about as well. I'll just skip past the middle point for a second, but the other cool thing is that, as mentioned, elemental attack skills will go to level 6, but they've now added a new skill that when you get to level 6, it will grant the free element status and here's the really cool thing, increase elemental attack damage when continually attacking. Now there's a really cool armor skill in Generations that is a similar kind of thing, but it works around affinity in that when you continually attack a monster, you build up affinity. So it's like a really, really cool kind of aggressive focus skill. Now if you apply this to elements, it now means that if you are in a situation where take the Dual Blades and you're in like a fast attacking combo, or the Sword and Shield where you use the infinite combo, if you continually attack, you can increase that elemental damage potency, which is very, very cool. Now, they didn't say it here, but I'm really hoping that extends to abnormal status as well. They have specifically called this out as elements, so I don't quite know whether that will happen, but I really hope it does, because if that goes into the point where you can just attack and you can increase, say, paralysis or sleep or poison effectiveness by continually attacking, that would also make for some pretty exciting builds and could also make it, slightly more viable in multiplayer gameplay. But that much I'll of course have to test when the game comes out, but for the time being, at least for elements, it means that if you are continually attacking, you can of course increase your elemental attack damage in the process. So very, very exciting. Now, of course, yes, again, speccing into, a level 6 is quite a big commitment, but if there is actually genuinely value in it, then we can see some rather interesting builds in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. And of course, for those of you guys that have been asking, yes, we will be bringing back Mixed Set Monday when Iceborne launches, so expect to see some of those. Now, of course, if we jump back to the middle point, something else we're talking about, of course, the non-elemental boost skill, something that people use a lot in weapons where the element is hidden to give you that attack boost. It is still going to be a good skill, but they are nerfing it ever so slightly. It's going from the 10% increase that it previously gave you and dropping that down to a 5% increase instead. So still a valuable thing, but not quite as hefty as it was before. Now moving on from there to speak about Weakness Exploit, there are some changes here because keep in mind in Iceborne one of the big new features is of course the Clutch Claw, and this works around a weak spot mechanic, which is a really cool mechanic. I really like it, especially if you're in team play and you're playing with your friends and you want to kind of communicate, creating weak spots so that you can weaken the head so the hammer user can go crazy, or you can weaken the tail so someone can cut it off. It's a really cool mechanic, and of course they want to make some changes so that people are more inclined to use this functionality. So for Weakness Exploit, Of course, still function in a similar way, whereby, you know, attacking weak spots has increased affinity or gives you increased affinity. Level 1 gives you 10%, level 2 gives you 15%, and level 3 gives you 30%. However, factoring in the weak point stuff, if you are attacking a weak spot, something that has been wounded by the Clutch Claw, you then get, for level 1, an additional 5% affinity, for level 2, an additional 15%, and level 3, an additional 20%. So basically, it works like that. If you're attacking a weak spot, then you can get level 1 a total of 15%, level 2 a total of 30%, and level 3 a total of 50%. So basically, they just kind of spread it across to make it slightly more focused and geared towards attacking areas that have been weakened. So you're definitely going to want to factor that into your gameplay. And of course, when I start doing the new updated weapon tutorials, I'll be sure to go over the importance of all of that stuff in combat. They also, of course, did a little chart to try and illustrate this, but basically that goes over what I just said. So moving on from there, the other thing worth talking about is maximum might. So for this one, of course, maximum might is the skill which increases your affinity when your stamina is full. However, they're making some changes now so that it basically works around how long your stamina has been full for. So effectively, if you have level 1, if you keep your stamina full for 5 seconds, it increases your affinity by 10%, and that lasts for 2 seconds after your stamina is used. So whereas right now, it's active when your stamina is full, and the second you lose any, it goes away. This one now means that you can, technically speaking, use it for a little bit longer. So if you're going to do one of those kind of burst attacks, or maybe you're charging something up, then you have a 2-second window in which you can then use your maximum might boost before, of course, it expires. For level 2, that affinity increase goes up to 20%, and the buff lasts for 3 seconds after you use stamina. For level 3, that goes up to 30%, again lasting for 3 seconds. Level 4 is 40%, which lasts for 4 seconds. Level 5 works a little bit differently. Level 5 basically works like it used to, in that it activates as soon as your stamina is full, and deactivates the second you use it. So basically, if you want maximum might to behave how it does in World, you spec all the way to level 5 for that 40% affinity boost. Meanwhile, if you want to effectively, you know, have a little bit more leeway, if you're maybe using a weapon that kind of uses stamina, maybe something like the hammer, and you want to be able to charge up like a big level 3 charge, then you might lean more into, say, level 4, because you can still get that 40% affinity, but you have that 4-second grace window. Just keep in mind that in order for it to proc, you have to have had full stamina for 5 seconds. So, you know, there's a plus and minus to it, but it's actually quite an interesting way to play, and of course means that you have a little bit more flexibility when taking advantage of that buff. And then finally, the very last thing we're talking about is, of course, for the GUNLANCE fans, and this is actually really cool. In fact, there's a couple of very, very interesting things here. So, of course, GUNLANCE and Iceborne had the addition of the Worm Stake Blast. This is the really cool thing where you put the slinger ammo into your GUNLANCE, you then create the thing that you impale into the side of the monster, and you can then attack that with your shelling attacks to create explosions, and it does pretty cool damage. Now, off the back of the beta and off the back of kind of player feedback, they have then gone on to increase the destination damage slightly because they want to kind of make it slightly more viable. They've also made it so that the Worm Stake Blast loads a little bit faster, which I'm really happy about, because there were quite a lot of situations where it was just such a slow animation that you kind of thought to yourself, is it even worth using right now, or you just get hit? So it's good to kind of see they've actually kind of increased the speed of that slightly. But the next thing, yo, this is incredible, right? This has not been done for any other weapon before. Charge Blade up until this point has been the only weapon that officially has guard points, but now GUNLANCE has a guard point. They've added a guard point to the Worm Stake Blast loading animation. Now, as a very quick recap, for those of you unfamiliar with the terminology that is guard points, effectively the way that they work with the Charge Blade is that anytime during an animation where you're transforming from sword mode to axe mode, if your shield is presented in front of you, even if you're not actually holding block, that can trigger a guard point. So effectively, that's going to work the similar way in the GUNLANCE. I can't wait to actually test this out, but the way that it'll work, I would imagine, is that when you are creating that loading animation, when you are loading the Worm Stake Blast, as soon as your shield is presented in front of you, that creates a guard point, which means you could also use this now as a defensive mechanism. You could basically see like an attack coming, initiate the Worm Stake Blast loading animation to trigger that guard point. And of course, don't forget that guard points go very nicely with that new guard skill, because you get that affinity boost if you get a perfectly timed guard. So keep that in mind, definitely worth checking out. Of course, on top of that, if the Worm Stake Blast does not hit the mark, rather interestingly, or rather usefully, the equipped slinger ammo will actually drop on the ground, so you don't actually end up wasting it, so you can then put it back in and use it again. And finally, the wide sweep will no longer knock down players, which is really, really cool, because if you play full burst playstyle, and of course you go down full burst, do the wide sweep, and then go into the reload, a lot of the time you trip up your teammates, so it's kind of nice to know that actually won't be a problem. Of course, to round it all out, they also then showed a few of the possible combos from loading a Worm Stake Blast. You can of course go straight from there into the blast, you can go into the lateral thrust, the lunging up thrust, and of course also shelling. So yeah, lots of cool things to talk about. But for the time being, that's pretty much it. That's a recap of the changes they spoke about in the most recent live stream. I'm sure there may be some more. If they do, of course, speak about them, I'll be sure to keep you guys up to date. But for the time being, that's it. But keep it locked. I've got more stuff coming your way very soon. So until then, catch you guys next time. I really hope you guys enjoyed that video. Remember to hit that subscribe button and also click on the little bell icon to turn on notifications so you don't miss my next upload. Also, don't forget, you can check out TwoSixNine and Paradise Central streaming over on Twitch 6 days a week. You can find a link to the multi-stream in the description box down below. Be sure to drop by and get involved. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy. Catch you next time. Peace out.